Hi, we're live.
Hi. Okay.
We're live here with Joe, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and explain to you who he is and what he does and where he's been. It's very exciting.
I'm Joe Swenson. I have, in 1972, with the Air Force, I did some uh, classified things. And I told a friend of mine from childhood when I got back a little brief idea of what I did. And years later, he read the book, The Philadelphia Experiment, and he thought that sounded about like what I was doing. So he had me read it. And I found it interesting. I was using some of the technology, but not all of it. And so I decided to do a little more research on the Philadelphia project. Back at that time in the mid '70s, we in mid, it was about '78 or something like that, '76, '78. I was in school, back in school again, and through the college that I was attending, we had access to.
Let's do. How do we stop this?
This is hard on my back.
Okay. How do we stop this? This is our trial run. I don't know how to stop it. They're not going to let it stop.
Turn it off.
Okay.
You okay?
They're just going to let it run.
Okay.
So.
Do you want a pillow, dear?
Try and get this done quickly. So anyway.
We're just gonna start again.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Tonia Miller, and I'm here with the call out report. And we're here today with Joe Swenson.
Swenson.
Right, Swenson. And he has been to space. And he has some amazing stories for all of us. And it is going to show us what we have not been experiencing in the country, and as far as intel and understanding where we are in time and technology. Thank you.
Okay. When I got back, in 1972, I told my friend Bruce Van Slyke about it, and he ruminated on it for a while. And in '76 or '77, '78, somewhere in that time frame, he got a copy of the Philadelphia Experiment by Charles Berlitz, and he thought that that was probably something like what I did. It was and it wasn't. And so anyway, Bruce had me read it, and I thought it was an interesting book.
And so Bruce is who to you?
Bruce Van Slyke was just a friend from childhood.
Okay.
And
the title of his book?
The title of the book that I was reading?
Mm-hmm.
The Philadelphia Experiment.
Okay.
And it was written by Charles Berlitz.
Okay.
And so, anyway, I read it. Being in college at the time, I decided to surf the internet to see what I could find, although it wasn't the internet at that time. It was kind of dedicated. And I found that I could get into Edwards Air Force Base online library.
Mm.
And so I got it. I found that they had a copy of the book there in digital format. And it was written in WordPerfect, or the original Microsoft Word before Office. And they had three colors in there. They had the normal black and white that you add to think about, and then they added, or I should say, four colors. They added red, yellow, green, and blue, and those were commentaries by apparently some scientists and military personnel. And those commentaries, along with the Allende letters and their commentaries, were on that site. And I went from there and read those. And one of the commentators on there mentioned a book by Francis Bitter, and it was called Magnetism, the Education of a Physicist.
Okay.
And apparently, before the U.S. got into World War II, he went over to England to help them with a problem with mines and magnetic mines that the Germans were putting into the harbors. And he had an English person as a handler to make sure things go smoothly for him. And so he...
So is this handler with one of the agencies, obviously?
yeah, over there, obviously.
Yeah.
And they had put ads in the local newspapers across Britain asking for anyone to help with this problem. And they ran across a magician, a stage magician. And so the two of them went to the show, and he did the normal: make a girl disappear, make a rabbit disappear, make bloods appear, and everything disappearing and appearing. So after the show, Bittner goes backstage with the magician and his handler, and he said, the magician said, you wanted to see a ship disappear, make it invisible.
Okay, so this is where it all ties together.
This is where it all ties together.
Great.
And so what he did is the magician had a pedestal, and on that pedestal he had an aquarium, and in the aquarium he had a model ship floating. He went over to the wall and he flipped the switch, and the ship vanished. He flipped it again and it reappeared. So they thought this was amazing, and they asked him, is that how he did all the stage tricks? And he said, no, because it's harmful to organic life forms.
Yeah.
And so he took the information back, and at first they wanted to talk to Tesla to have him do all the math and stuff for it. And he refused because he looked at the project and he said, this is going to be harmful to human beings. So then they took it to Einstein, and he didn't really look at it a whole lot.
That sounds like a joke.
He didn't really look at it a whole lot because Tesla had already looked at it.
Right.
But he gave them the formulas for doing this, and you can find those formulas in Charles Steinmet's book, 4 Lectures on Space-Time and Relativity. So anyway, then they had this room full of calculators, people with adding machines, to work out all the mathematics for the wave functions going around the ship and stuff that they had to do. And they did all that. They ran the tests. The ship made it from Philadelphia to another dock up north. It was like 610 nautical miles, as I remember. And they did that in a total of 10 minutes by using the field. But the problem was that they ended up with people that were in the bulkheads and in the decks that were stuck there. They brought the ship back, and Allende letters will tell you about how people would.
So they're dealing with frequencies.
They're dealing with frequencies.
And they're dealing with time warps, or they're dealing with portholes, or
they're dealing with fractional dimensions.
Okay.
If you look at the math, it's fractional dimensions. So anyway, they had a problem with people, and some of the people would get stuck, and then they needed someone to lay hands on them so that they'd be back in this physical reality. And a lot of a number of sailors that were left from the experiment were held up in top of one of the VA buildings, and they'd have frequency generators on on their waist as belts to keep them in this reality. And sometimes the batteries would die before the technicians could get to them, and they get a strange look on their face and walk through the wall several stories up and just vanish.
Okay.
Okay. Now that's the story as it was related in the material that was
Right.
that I gave
That's public
so far.
domain that I've seen
That's
on
public
YouTube,
domain, yeah.
YouTube before.
Okay.
So how do we build on that?
But what the thing was is when they did this, they rang the Earth time or space time system
Which
every
is
20
located
years.
where? Where's the Earth tapes? Where's
It's
that located?
right here, the whole Earth,
Okay.
the orbits around the sun, everything, and it rings every 20 years. So that was in 1943.
So how is that gauged that it rings every 20 years?
You know, they figured it out because it rang again in 1963.
Okay.
And when it rang then, they're hoping to do some other stuff with it. And they realized that they needed people with more psychic powers to be able to do anything.
Okay.
And so
Is this where you come in and they pick you up as
eventually. So the whole time I was off from the Air Force in 72 to whatever, I was going through training.
Was this when you were going through training for remote viewing or?
For remote viewing, something they called the gateway process they were developing back then. And there were a number of interesting things about it, and I didn't realize what was going on, you know, because it was supposed to be therapy for my PTSD from the service.
Okay. And you were in the Air Force?
I was in the Air Force.
Okay.
I was an oxymoron. I was in military intelligence.
Okay.
And so anyway, back to the story. I got through all that training, and I had been playing with, they had military intelligence monitoring me from 72 to 82. And I played games with them because they'd get on the phone and I'd say, oh yeah, they picked up the phone, or yeah, someone else was added onto the phone line, and oh, they turned on the tape recorder, one of the people dropped off, and you know, that type of thing. And so in 1982, a double blind meeting was arranged for me with a military intelligence person. And
So this means that somebody contacts the other person and somebody contacts you and nobody
knows who was contacted in between, other
Right.
than setting up the appointment. And
so how do you validate that that's something you want to show up to?
You just do if you want to.
Okay.
And I was curious. So I showed up. There was a locked hallway that he had a key to get into.
Okay.
And so we went back there and we were totally isolated, and he did an interview. And he said, well, how did you know? And I said that we were on the line and that we were turning tape recorders on and off and that stuff. Are you psychic? And I said, no, I was just playing a game. I could hear the change in resonance, you know, when they click something on and off, because electronically that creates a ring type of thing. And I thought he had bought it. And a little bit later, I received a letter to come down to Minneapolis, VA.
Okay.
And go to a building that's no longer there. It was between Highway 55 and the Mississippi River. And it was one of those old WPA buildings that was 3 stories tall. And I go in and I go up 3 flights of stairs to see this guy in this office, this old guy. He doesn't really give me his name. But later I found out from looking at pictures and stuff that this fellow was named Al Bielek from the Philadelphia experiment.
Now, have you found that a lot of the important or interesting people don't put their picture up on the internet, so you can't really figure out who they are? You know,
Not really.
because in my experience, like some of the people that I know, they don't show their face.
If they're military intelligence and they're still active, they're probably not going to
Yes,
do that.
exactly. So when somebody does like that,
It was years later
Yeah.
in the 90s that I saw a picture of him and I said, that's him.
okay, so you identified him later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so anyway, they decided that they could use me for the experiment. Only they didn't tell me it was an experiment. They told me it was more relaxation therapy for
And
my
how old are
PTSD.
you at this point?
Oh, I must be about 28, 29.
Okay.
Probably closer to 28.
Mm-hmm.
Because 83, I'd be 30.
Right.
So 29. And anyway, so later on, I get a letter to report back to the VA and do this again. And the room that they send me to is staged like you'd stage a set in a play. There's tape marks on the floor for the overstuffed chair I'm supposed to sit in.
Mm.
There's tape marks on the floor for where her desk is.
Okay.
There's a square of tape on the floor for where she can move her rolling chair. And there's a square of tape mark for the fits the cassette player that she had. And they played a relaxation tape. It was a C30. My session was an hour long. So a C30 means that it has 15 minutes on the side. And they played for an hour. However that works, I don't know. Because
So what's the point of playing this C30?
it was one of the Monroe tapes where they have
Subliminal
messages and frequencies intertwined.
Right. Does this tie into at all, like how you now have your website and work with frequencies, or does that,
That the frequencies that I work with on my website ties more into what we did in space.
And your website is chakraforce.com?
Chakraforce.com, yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of healing frequencies on there for people that they can do themselves.
What's important for everybody to understand is that frequencies are used by the military. They've been used in subliminal advertising and influencing, and they could be used for our health. So we've been using frequencies to hurt our enemies, to hurt our own people, to help our people, but we could be doing a lot more for remote medicine and a lot of other modalities.
Yeah.
So last summer I saw in Washington Post, some very vague, commentary about how China uses, they were super vague, but basically I'm sure they were talking about scalar energy and some of these other forces, frequencies and they were saying, China is using these in their warfare. Well, if China is using them in their warfare, don't you think we are? And the other thing is that, by the time anybody says anything at all on a newspaper or on a television, we're so far ahead, way more than what they're exposing. And so that's why what Joe is bringing to the table and hasn't really talked about is so important, because, how much more advanced we actually are.
So anyway, part of the Montauk project when I was doing a session is they beam a jumping radar beam at you. So it jumps frequency.
Sure.
And they synced that up with the one on Montauk Island and wanted me to remote view the things that the person in the Montauk chair was.
So anybody who doesn't understand what remote viewing is, he could sit here and remote view me in my car coming here and see where I got lost, see me picking my nose. So you can basically violate anybody's personal space. You don't need to have a camera installed in your house to have somebody spying on you or hearing you. There are people who can remote view. There are people who astral project. And you know, these are real things and they pay people to do this in the military.
Well, outside of the military, in business, you can make yourself a good six-figure income by remote viewing.
And the problem is that there's no paper trail, there's no video trail, there's no proof one way or another, which makes this like potentially very dangerous.
So anyway, they had me remote viewing the Montauk project, and when we started out, they were looking for a timeline where someone by the name of George Bush would be King of the United States or Emperor of North America.
Was this senior?
This was George Bush Sr. at the time. Apparently, he was doing something with the CIA at the time.
Well, he was the head of the CIA, but then he wasn't, correct?
Yeah, well, you're never X.
Yes. Well,
And-
he yeah, go ahead.
And so anyway, I did that first session, and I got out of the session and collected my pay to drive home the 230 some miles home. I had this splitting headache, and it was just like someone from, one of the cops had focused a radar beam on me, because I used to drive over the road and I'd feel those coming up and stuff. And so the next time, instead of sitting in the chair properly, I just threw myself in, knocked the chair off the spots and everything, and then leaned off further to one side so that I wouldn't have the radar beam. And so had me look at some more things. And some of the stuff they brought up had me having some of the night terrors that I had from the Air Force come back to the surface. And then I went back for a third session, and during these sessions, we looked at thousands of timelines, and people say,
So when you say you were in the Air Force, is this when you were in space?
I was in basic training.
Okay.
And during basic training, they pulled me out for 3 days. And for those 3 days, I spent a long time in space.
Okay. So it was one of those.
It spanned many decades. So
Therefore you have 20 years of extra experience.
Yeah, that was with aliens when I was out there. We built a.
And how is it that they maintained your body for that period of time?
I wore a silver space suit. Silver space suit. Having trouble talking right now. Hang on.
You're doing great.
And this provided all the life support, monitored all your acupuncture points, and injected different frequencies to keep you healthy.
Sure.
I went from about 160 pounds down to under 100 pounds in that 3-day period, which was much longer. One of the first tasks they had me do was they had me, the aliens, Caucasian aliens, had me working, welding a ship together, building a ship, helping them build the ship.
So when you came back, did you age significantly? Like
No, I hadn't aged at all.
Nobody said you look old or extra tired or
The
anything?
only thing that you could tell was you could see every muscle, every tendon, and every bone in my body.
Well, that's a big difference.
And I had to gain weight before they'd send me home.
Sure.
But that's beside the
And how
point.
did your teeth hold up under all of this?
The teeth?
Mm-hmm.
They're still there. I lost the teeth because of Sjogren's syndrome.
Okay. Well, what I'm wondering is when you're talking about the bones and stuff, did they have extra, did the suit do, electrical stimulation to help keep your muscles intact?
It did that, but it also, you didn't have to use the bathroom.
Okay.
You didn't take in any fluids.
Okay.
And you seldom had anything to eat. Sometimes they would give me.
Is it because your system is like a complete circuit?
Yeah, it's a complete circuit. But sometimes they would pull me over and they give me a little glass that was supposed to be water that was kind of oily.
Oh my God. So you're telling me that you dealt with 20 years of really not getting food, and then did you get to sleep in a bed? No, I'm guessing no.
The room that I had was about 8 by 8, and it had a platform on one side, and that platform was lit. The floor and the ceiling of the room were lit, and all the walls were lit, and they would change intensity and color.
So you spent in your own reality 20 years isolated
Basically.
without eating and having to work and being in a suit and not being touched. And that has to fuck with your head. I'm sorry. Excuse
Yeah,
my
it does.
language.
Anyway, back to the
And,
month.
and did they tell you that this was what was going to happen to you ahead of time?
No. We had just gone to the rifle range and I had scored marksman with an M16 on full automatic. And we had had supper, and after supper, my DI came up to me and he had a yellow sheet of paper with some scribbles on it that he was holding. He said, you're going for extra physical training and you'll be gone for 3 days. And if you're lucky, you'll get back alive. Okay. Yeah, so I said, do I
So
need...
what percentage of people don't make it back?
I don't know. Anyway, he...
How many people do you think have done this?
I don't know. I'm sure there's been a lot. Anyway, so one of the things I asked is I said, should I take my uniforms with me? And he said, no. Should I take my civic clothes with me? And he said, no. We need those here in case for your parents in case you don't come back. Well, what about my razor and personal items, personal care items? And he said, no, leave those here too. They'll give you a new uniform when you get there. I was kind of like, okay. So he gives me this piece of paper that's supposed to be directions on how to get there. And
you're already married at this point?
No, I'm not married yet.
Okay.
And the scribbles on there are just scribbles. They don't mean a thing. And I've got to take this and walk, and our barracks was several blocks from anything else on the base. And I walked to a building that was a low, long building made out of concrete block. And it was two-tone block. And in the center of the building, there was like an aircraft door that folds up. And it was about 40 foot wide. And off to the side, there was a huge pine tree. And this was in the evening, and the door was on the west side of the building. And so the sun would shoot in, and there was no reflection inside. You couldn't see anything inside. You could just see the wedge of the sunlight going in. And under the tree, that big pine tree, there was no shade. There was no shade on the building. It was directly straight down, which didn't make any sense. And I got there, and a disembodied voice said, "Why are you here?" And
a disembodied voice meaning they were using voice to God technology. It was coming out of a microphone. What are we?
It was in my head somehow.
Okay.
And
the patents for voice to God technology are in what?
The silent sound patent was put out by Patrick Flanagan.
In what year?
Oh God, I don't remember. Back in the 70s.
1973?
Something like that.
Okay.
And he did other patents for the government, and they did other work.
It is important that people know that a lot of this stuff is public record,
Yeah.
but nobody looks it up.
And I can talk about anything in this public record.
And to look up a patent, you have to go to Google more, Google even more, Google more, basically, and you can go to the patent section and put in certain things to search. So Google sometimes changes the procedure for that. Go ahead.
Okay. So anyway, they took me in. And 3 days later, they asked me why I was here, and I said, told them, because it was supposedly physical exercise. And they said, return to your barracks. And as far as I knew at that point in time, no time had transpired. But that first night back, I was sleeping with one eye open.
Yeah.
And I'd roll over and sleep with the other eye open. Whatever eye was down against the bed, I'd have open watching the room because of the night terrors that I had and some of the memories that came back
From in space.
from being out there and some of the encounters I had. And so that was what I told.
Did they provide
Bruce.
anyone for you to talk to, decompressing with?
No.
You're a one-man team?
Yeah. I'm sure there were other one-man teams out there.
Oh, I'm sure
But,
there was.
Back then, there was talking about
So were you,
guys
are
being
you,
an
are you
army
like
of one.
on a satellite? Or what kind of facility are we talking about?
When they first took me out there, they got to a point in space, and then they did a jump from there to Saturn.
Okay.
And when they did that jump, I was in the silver spacesuit that did all this other stuff.
So the question is, what universe were you in?
And so anyway, the spaceship went through the gate, the portal, and I stayed behind because I wanted to get married to my wife.
Mm.
And originally they said they were going to send me home so I could. And I knew this was a long trip because we're out in the middle of nowhere. But out in the rings of Saturn, we built 2 ships. We built one that was 2,500 foot long that we placed at L5, Lagrange point 5, between the Earth and the Moon. And we did that in the 1950s sometime because...
So when you're traveling back through, you're going on one ship after another, you're going through places that are being radiated, you're going through holes. It's a little bit dangerous. Is this not true?
Maybe that's why they think you might not come back.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we got through this, and I was floating in space, and they said, well, we'll be back for you in a little bit.
You know what? I think that somebody was praying for you and
Oh, yeah.
intuitively knew and was closing the portholes and
well,
doing some heavy spiritual warfare for you, even though you didn't know it.
The teleportation system is part of the system.
Okay.
They use gates to teleport basically everywhere, kind of like a Stargate type of thing.
Sure.
But they are more energy than what you see on Stargate. And they came back, they picked me up, and in between time, while I had nothing to do but float there, I did program learning.
Right. Now, do you think that you picked up any kind of viruses, got burned? Did you have any kind of residual issues from this? Bacteria? Fungus?
I found out, I thought I got fibromyalgia after 83. Okay. I'll get back to the Montauk Project here. One of the next meetings I had, the handler who flew in from Montauk Island for my meeting could not make it. And so I had an hour before an appointment with my programming partner, and I sat and waited in the parking lot. I found a shady spot and listened, and this is by the International Airport for Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Sure.
And that's radar that they used. And anyway, I noticed that when my session was supposed to start, there was absolutely no air traffic. And there was no air traffic until the end of my session.
Wow.
So it's like 1 hour session with absolutely no air traffic.
Okay.
Well, they were using radar.
Right. They only have one set of equipment.
Yeah. So the next session, which was last session, basically, was the first part of August. And I had I got there and I decided I don't care what the controller wants me to do. I'm going to just see what's on Montauk Island and on the Montauk base.
Okay.
And there was a labyrinth down there. And down there they had a reptilian in the labyrinth that was basically behind the project.
Now, when you say a labyrinth, like, what comes to my mind is sort of like a maze kind of
Let's
thing.
talk about Dungeons and Dragons, multiple levels, multiple rooms, multiple
Okay.
corridors, multiple hazards,
Okay, great.
that type of thing. Lots of electronics equipment. And so when I was in the service, we had kill on sight order for reptilians.
Okay.
And
Can you describe what an alien, what a reptilian looks like?
This one was about 4 foot tall, scaly, had a tail and a kind of a beak type of mouth.
Okay. Would you say the tail is like kind of like this? And
It goes from their ass down to the floor.
great. So it's almost like a third leg coming out of their butt.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a small one because most of the ones that we ran into in space were like about 7 foot tall.
Okay.
And they're built muscularly.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And can you ever, are there any reptilians? Have there been some that have been disguised that look human or almost human or?
Yeah, back on base before they sent me home.
Oh, those are hybrids?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I thought, well, how can we put an end to this project? Because how can I put an end to the reptilian? And since it was like a labyrinth down there,
Okay.
I thought, a minotaur would be a good thing to send down there. So
A minotaur. You want to shed some light on what that is?
minotaur is a half man, half bull.
Oh, wow.
With horns from the Greek myth.
Right.
And
I think there's something similar to this in Jasher, but it was a different animal man situation.
Okay. Anyway, so I released this energy beast that looked like a minotaur down there.
Okay.
And it just kind of destroyed the thing and shut the project down. Then in September, I had had a software business during this whole time, producing custom software for people. And one of the persons I produced software for was a fellow by the name of Tom Davies, and he was a judge for the city of Fargo. And the software I had written for him was to help him navigate people through bankruptcy.
Okay.
And he called me to make a change to the software. Regulations change from time to time.
Sure.
And so I get into my car to drive over, and I notice that there's someone following me
Okay.
in a station wagon, a brown station wagon.
And how often does this kind of thing happen?
Well,
That you can
from
identify.
70 to 82, it happened quite a bit.
Right, before they got the trackers.
Yeah. From 82 to 92, it was the NSA that did it.
Well, they probably had trackers, but the point of having you followed is for probably intimidation, really.
I don't know. It's not this part. The point of having me followed was to make sure I was there.
Okay.
Anyway, so I lost him and followed him into the parking lot behind the black building in Fargo. And in the alley there, he met up with 4 guys dressed all in black. That got out of a white van, minivan type
Sure.
of thing. And they had gas masks and they had a tank of gas.
Okay. What do they think they're going to do with that?
Well, we'll get there. And then I waited and I watched them from across the parking lot, hidden by other vehicles. And they came down and they were arguing fierce. And I'm going like, apparently they didn't get what they wanted. And then I heard sirens from an ambulance, and the ambulance went in, pulled someone out with a stretcher. And when the ambulance got there, these two vehicles vanished. I mean, they drove away as fast as they could.
Okay.
And the ambulance techs brought down someone on a stretcher, and I thought, well, that was interesting. I wonder what happened, because
Okay.
I didn't really know. And so I moved my car around closer to the door, and I went in and went up to the top of the building to see Tom.
Okay.
And that building, the Sears building there, has a hydraulic elevator.
Tom is who?
Tom Davies.
And why is he significant? in this
He's the
story?
judge who had the software
Oh, okay, great.
that I was working on. And I get up and see Tom, and he says, Joe, you wouldn't believe what happened. I said, oh, what happened? And he said, the elevator leaked gas, and it knocked out everyone in the top 3 floors of the building.
Oh yeah. Well, how does an
This
elevator?
is a hydraulic elevator. This is
right. And somehow people don't ever think about stuff enough to put 2 and 2 together. Just like
I said, oh,
just like the Twin Towers just can melt down.
I said, oh, geez, you're lucky you got out. You're lucky to be alive. He said, yeah, one of the gals was pregnant, and they had to take her down to the ER as fast as possible.
Okay, so that's a liability issue because you've now endangered and hurt a child.
Yeah. And well, what it was a team set to get me. And so I was kind of like, okay. And again, in December, they tried again. They had someone who was an MP that was out on leave, compassionate leave is what he said to the police officer afterwards. And he had a pickup truck, a 4x4 pickup truck, big, heavy truck. And he had put a 1-inch boilerplate in the bed of the truck to give it more weight and traction. And he put boilerplate on the bumpers. So he had wide bumpers made out of boilerplate on both front and back of this thing. And I had come to a stoplight to go see someone. This is out by the Crystal Sugar Beet plant in Moorhead. And we were waiting for the light to change. The light changed. And we started going through the light. And there was a row of cars behind me. And there's a foggy section across the road that you have to go through because of the
Okay,
beet
so
plant.
first you escape from being gassed.
Yeah.
And now you're doing what? You're moving across the street. How did you get out of the building? And then you found out about other people.
When I was
getting-
gassed,
Yes.
oh, I just went out normal way. There was no one waiting for me. They
Did you-
they had already gone.
Did you smell it?
No, there was no smell to
No
the
smell
gas.
to it. So how did you know that there was gas? Did you hear
Tom
it?
told me.
Okay.
Tom told me that there was gas. And so anyway,
So you just intuitively left.
I did the patch to the work. The work was done, so I left. Hello.
Right. I guess
That was the job.
the Almighty was with you.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're driving north on the road, and the cross traffic is stopped with the stoplight.
Sure.
And there's about 4 or 5 cars behind me. And this guy pulls out from around 2 cars in the cross traffic, sweeps out and goes around. The car, he's driving like a maniac. And the cars behind me take the ditch. And then I saw, the fog is so bad, you can't see the nose of your car. And I had a 65 Dodge Dart at the time.
Sure.
And
They don't make them like that anymore.
no. And he hit us, and there was a big bang. I had a brief second where I saw his headlights in the mirror before he hit. And he took the car has an I-beam that's about like this for part of the frame, you know, and he crushed the I-beam endwise like this, 16 inches.
Okay.
So he hit us really hard.
Wow.
The car had a bench seat, and it had a big L bracket, little L bracket to hold the back up. I broke that bracket with my back. There was a 1-inch tubular bar in the back of the bench seat. I bent that, and I moved the steering wheel forward a little bit, so it wasn't true anymore.
And the whole family was in the car.
And the whole family was in the car, and the girls were in the back seat sleeping, and Jen was turned sideways and dozing.
I wasn't dozing. I was checking on the girls.
Checking on the girls, okay.
So this happened with your children in the car?
Yeah.
And your wife?
And my wife. And so I got out, walked over to the guard station, and I said, call the police and get some people out here. He said, how many people died? And I said, none that I know of. Yeah, he said, that was a really bad crash.
So now we're going to thank the creator. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I get back to the car and I hear him telling a story, and he says, oh yeah, I'm an MP and I'm on compassionate leave, and after this I hope to be going back to the Air Force, and they'll give me a promotion and a transfer.
You think so?
That's exactly what happened.
Wow.
He wanted to be in military intelligence, and they put him in military intelligence, and
So
sent him to Greenland.
Okay. So he gets a promotion
For hitting us.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's like your job interview, because now they have something on you.
Yeah.
They have something on them.
Yeah. And so anyway, that left me with that and another accident together. Left me with 7 herniated discs in my neck, 2 fractured vertebrae in my neck, 5 herniated discs between my shoulder blades, and 4 herniated discs in my lumbar region. So I was in a lot of pain.
Sure.
And I was having intermittent seizures if I went out in the cold, not seizures, strokes. I go out in the cold and muscles would clamp down trying to protect the spinal cord, and they cut off blood flow to part of the brain. And found a friendly chiropractor that was giving me treatment to keep me going.
Okay.
And then the hospital medical doctors wanted to do a myelogram. And so they did a myelogram on me. And they used the wrong contrasting dye.
Uh-oh. What happened to you?
And that burned out some of the nerves, so I was paralyzed from the waist down to some degree.
So what else do you think they burned out?
I don't know.
Were they trying to flush out your memories?
Oh no, that wasn't part of it. This was just an accident.
Are you sure?
There was a German company that was purchasing the contrasting dye that's used for metallurgy, and they would repackage it and list it suitable for human beings. And I think 250,000 people in Australia were paralyzed from the waist down because of this. So this is a big
Well, that doesn't
screw up for profit.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't done on purpose and you cover up by hurting a large amount of people.
No, not really. The hospitals picked it up because it was the lowest bidder.
Cheap, yeah. Okay.
And so, anyway.
So it's a profit margin thing.
Yeah. My chiropractor, Bob Lee, got me to walk again. I kept thinking these good thoughts that it's going to heal and whatever.
Mm-hmm. And this is before you started working with frequency healing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And So I had done some other work, and I had a letter from Russia, a couple letters from Russia. Some of them demanding me to come out and work on their towers and this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
And I'm going like, I couldn't read Russian, so I had my brother-in-law do it. And in order to entice me, they sent a book to me on a magazine, actually, on psychic developments in Russia
Okay.
for controlled psychic stuff.
So when you were reading that, how much of that do you relate to
Well,
personally?
the only thing I related to was they had Kirlian photography, and I knew about that. And they had an acupoint locator. I thought, well, that's kind of cool.
Okay.
And I looked at it, and I said, it's using a 709 op amp, and they weren't being made anymore.
Sure.
So, but 741s were. And so I redesigned the circuit to use a 741. And then tested it out. I still had the left side that wasn't working. And so as I'm doing this, I'm looking at the meridians.
Sure.
And I'm going, oh, well, there's one meridian here that's not working properly.
Okay. Do you know how to bring this back to everybody else? So meridians, you have different meridians on your body, and one of the things you can do when you have something hurting on you is you can swipe your hand like this or use a magnet, and then you can say I clear, and then you clear whatever, and you think about clearing it, and you can clear different kinds of emotional, physical issues, energetic issues sometimes.
That wasn't really what I did with it.
Okay.
I took it into my next chiropractic appointment.
Okay.
And he said, yeah, that's death. You're right. He had told me that there's a blood vessel back here in the neck that gets pinched and causes the stroke symptoms.
Sure.
And he found a working one over here. And then he looked at this one and found two working ones. He said, well, the other one should be about here for the point that was missing. And then he took the inputs and bridged them like that. And the thing is, on that op amp, it's like 50,000 to 1, so there should be no power there at all.
Right.
And I felt this cold fire racing up this arm, coming up to the back of my neck and exploding.
Okay. What was your interpretation of that?
I got my left side back.
Oh, amazing.
And he had worked with me for months before that to keep me walking and stuff.
Okay.
I mean, we went into one credit union function. They have a supper type of thing, and we went to that in Fargo in January. And I had to have 2 canes, my wife help, and 2 daughters help me to get moving, to tell you where it was at.
That's a blessing that you had their
So-
support. And I'm sure that was hard
Yeah,
on them. And
yeah.
it's always important to acknowledge the families of the people who have gone through this, because the families also go through this as well.
Yeah. So anyway, monitoring the phone lines and stuff was still going on. I talked about some of the stuff to a friend from politics,
Sure.
and one of my ex-NSA handlers, Dudley Wells, pulled me aside and said, they're going to kill you for talking about this stuff. And I said, fine, put me out of my misery, because I was in a lot of pain.
Yeah. People just don't understand how traumatic and upsetting all of this really can be, and just imprinted in your soul.
And then you still have the night terrors going on.
Right. And so,
Anyway.
and you're not getting paid for those 3 days.
Yeah.
Or you get paid 3 days for the 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all of that mental and emotional trauma
Yeah.
and stress. This is really not okay, in my opinion, to do this to somebody
Yeah.
and have them not know and not really get any payback or any kind of credit, and then you can't talk to your family. You couldn't come home and just tell your wife I was gone for, your girlfriend. I mean, you didn't have one
in
at
order
the
to
time.
get out of the service, I had to sign a 50-year NDA.
Does that include
So-
space-time continuum 50 years?
That's 50 years in our timeline.
But see, that's also kind of a fraudulent document, isn't it? I mean, if you don't put something like space in there, then
It's not in there. It's all the needs of the service.
oh, okay.
So, I mean, that's what happened. And then in the 90s, the 86 Airborne were being trained as remote viewers using the Gateway experience. And well, they got 100% disability when they came back, but a number of them were using me as target practice, and so
So is that what happens to people who try to get out or do something that they don't want, or they just
it can be.
pick on somebody that
It can be. It's not something.
somebody's family puts on
It's
a
not
list,
something.
let's say?
It's not something they're going to use all the time because that would show their hand,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And
They pick somebody intelligent that
it's not.
does something a little out of the ordinary and decides to torture them.
They can do that, but it's, you know, the 86 Airborne decided that they were going to leave me alone.
Okay.
And at that point, I was labeled toxic. So anytime that they did anything like that, they'd have problems with me. Anyway, in August 2001, I had my FBI exit interview so that they would, because in the 90s, it was NSA, and then it was an ex-NSA people, and then it was the FBI that was following me. So I had the exit interview
The exit interview to get out.
that they no longer were going to follow me.
And how did you negotiate that?
They came up to me and told me that this was because I hadn't done anything. They thought maybe I'd do something really drastic. And
So basically, they do things to you, then they're afraid that you will expose them, and so then they threaten you, they intimidate
they do
you.
things to you, you know. Anyway, so I had the exit interview, and I no longer had satellite coverage of my house and whatever. And all right, that's what I figured. And then 9/11 happened.
Did you have your house?
Huh?
Did you still have your house?
No, I lost my health in the auto accident
Oh,
in
yeah.
83.
Okay, I thought you said house, not health.
House.
Okay, house. Okay.
And so anyway, that happened, and then a little bit later, my friend up in Fargo told me, "Hey, you got to try this app on Google. It's Google Earth, and it allows you to look right down to your house, you know. But then it grays everything out at a certain level
Sure.
because they don't want it." Some of the guys had been apparently taking pictures of women that were naked on the
Sure.
beach, and I'm going like,
Right, and
Yeah.
that would be why they can
They-
they can do something to the top of somebody's car or hit somebody's something, and it makes it easier for them to find it with a satellite or.
well, anyway, so they then said that they don't have the capability of zooming in that far.
Okay.
So I'm looking on this, and
And this was how many years ago? This is
this was in the 2000s,
okay.
and I'm looking down and going down and going down and going down and going down, and then I've got a grill on the deck on the picture that they've got, and I'm going down, and you can see the red coals in there and how hot they are,
Sure.
and you can see the color of the meat on the grill.
Would be late 90s, dear.
Late 90s, okay. You can see the color on the grill, and I know what was there. I knew when it was time to flip and I would have been out there in a minute or two, and I knew what day it was because of what was on the grill. And so I said, "Wow, this is fantastic. I can see all this stuff in my grill and stuff like that." He's going, "Oh, you're not supposed to be able to see that far down." And I said, "Really?" And I went back the next day. You could see the top of my house.
Wow.
So
Look down, Santa Claus looking down your chimney.
yeah, they're still monitoring everything. So
Sure.
anyway, that happened, and I worked for the phone company for a few years, and I ended up in high cap design, high cap maintenance, and I got a phone call that from Colorado Springs military base, and they needed some fiber redesigned because they have a hyperloop magnetic levitation railroad underneath the ground in there.
And this is where?
Colorado
Sure.
Springs.
Well, in fact, we have stuff like that going
And
across the country.
they needed the segment between Colorado Springs and Grand Junction.
Sure.
They're working on because they're trying to reduce the timing on the delay of the circuits.
Right. And these are what kind of circuits?
Fiber optics.
Okay.
So I did that, and so I know that there's huge underground maglev trains.
Well, I
that are
think
running.
that most people actually realize that underneath the Colorado airport is a facility. I think people do understand that.
Well, I don't know whether it's a facility or not, but anyway.
Okay.
So that's some of the stuff we did in general. Like I said, we built the two vehicles. One was placed at L5. So when I came back, they wanted me to first be an officer
Sure.
because I had shown experience working with nuclear particles. And I turned on officer school because I'm dyslexic, and I wouldn't get through the material in a timely fashion.
Sure.
Then
That's partly why you're smart, because it helps you to problem solve and do things a little bit out of the box.
you have to do it differently.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to do something else, and they said no. And then they decided that they were going to send me for this additional training. The additional training was, or not additional training, they were going to send me to testing. When I was in basic training, all I did was testing,
Sure.
mental testing for this, that, and the other thing.
So we're just over an hour right now.
Okay.
So I want to kind of wrap up this show.
Okay.
And so if there's like something that you would want to say that would kind of tie this whole thing together and apply to the average person who's never heard of this before.
We have spaceships that can fly through rock.
Wow. Okay.
U.S. patent 10.144.152B, I think is the one.
Okay.
And that's for the TR-3B upgrades that they were doing.
And this is a public patent.
This is a public patent.
Wow.
They also have the patents that follow that for the different parts of the spaceship that make it so it can go through rock.
Wow.
So the Tic Tac video
And
of 2004 was probably a test.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that video, but
Other people will remember the video of the Tic Tac in 2004 that flew under the water
oh, okay.
and among other things. And they have the old style saucer, which looks like a top,
Wow.
on that video, and a lot of different things like that.
Wow.
We've got more technology out there than people can imagine.
Yeah.
So when they talked about the hacker from England finding out that we had a space force out there in different ships that were both U.S. and alien,
Mm-hmm.
and different commanders and stuff like that, and different wings and whatever, that's there. So there's probably thousands of men who've gone through something like this.
And
And
they can't talk, they can't tell their mom, they can't tell their sisters, and they
50-year NDA or 50-year NDA, on all this stuff.
yeah, and then they probably try to knock you off by that time at the end of the 50 years.
Yeah, and when I started trying to release the book, one
Or they figure it's just such old intel that it doesn't matter anymore. Is that
well, it's not that. One of the NSA agents, handlers that I had, wanted me to write the book and talk about this, and he said that he believed the stuff in space because he was in space, but he didn't believe any of the stuff about the Montauk Project.
Wow.
A reporter interviewed me, and he vetted the story with Rick Doty, and Rick didn't believe that we had anything in space like the vehicle at L5. And
Are there any creatures in space, like
oh yeah,
dragons, or
there's things out there that, let's put it this way, I don't like reading anything with H.P. Lovecraft or seeing anything that's based on that, because
Okay.
there's creatures out there like that.
Okay, so it cuts a little too close. Sometimes they do exposures with Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's about it. There's more that I can tell later, and there's some more that's covered in the book.
Interesting. Well, the book's name is?
I was a military lab rat.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
And
Thank you.
yep, we appreciate everybody for coming. And you can see more of Joe's work on his website, which I'll just let you plug for a minute.
I have a website called chakraforce.com, and so there I've taken material on frequency healing that was outlawed in 1954 and placed it up on the website. There's also other different things like on vitamins, minerals, and other types of healing.
Sure.
I think there's aromatherapy on that side.
I think that I want to say something. I think that everybody needs to understand the importance of calcium, magnesium, and potassium in your body's ability to heal and regenerate. And if you don't have all of those in your system, you don't fix. So you need to detox, you need to have minerals and vitamins to fill in and to heal yourself, regardless if you're on Earth or in space.
Space heals a lot faster.
And space, I'm sure it does, because there's less resistance, right?
Less gravity.
Right. So anyway, we thank you so much for being here. And this is a call out report, because when there's a crumb of a cookie, then there was a cookie. So we're always got to keep our eye out for the crumbs, because if a crumb of something, it came from something bigger. So blessings, and thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you.
We're not going to let it turn on.